I could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. My heart raced as I tried to maintain my composure, but the sight of my brother standing there, looking just as uncomfortable as I felt, sent a wave of anger through me. I had spent the last 6 years building a life for myself, one that didn't include him, and now my parents had decided to throw a wrench into it all. My brother, who was now 26, had always been the source of my frustration. Growing up, we had a rivalry that was encouraged by our parents, who seemed to think it was a healthy way to foster competition. But instead of pushing us to excel, it only deepened the resentment we felt toward each other. I often wondered if they realized the damage they had done by allowing our rivalry to fester unchecked. By the time I left for college, our relationship had deteriorated to the point where we barely spoke, and I was relieved to be away from the constant tension. When I started dating my fiancée, I thought things might change. We had been friends for 3 years before we began dating, and I was excited to introduce her to my family. But that dinner had turned into a nightmare. My brother's behavior was nothing short of appalling, and I had never seen him act that way before. The way he flirted with her, right in front of me, was a blatant attempt to provoke me. I had tried to brush it off, but when he crossed the line, I snapped. The fight that ensued was brutal, and it left scars that would take years to heal. After that incident, I made it clear to my parents that I wanted nothing to do with my brother. They tried to mediate, but I stood my ground. I was tired of their attempts to force a reconciliation that I didn't want. I had already distanced myself from him, and I was determined to keep it that way. My parents eventually accepted my decision, but I could tell they were still hopeful for a resolution. I didn't share their optimism. I had no desire to mend fences with someone who had caused me so much pain. Fast forward 6 years, and I had built a life that I was proud of. I was 28, engaged to a wonderful woman, and surrounded by friends who supported me. My parents had maintained a relationship with my brother, but I had made it clear that I didn't want to be involved. I had seen him at family gatherings, but we always avoided each other. It was a silent agreement that suited us both. No one in the family knew the details of our fallout, and I intended to keep it that way. I didn't want to relive that painful chapter of my life. Then came my bachelor party. I had envisioned a night filled with laughter and celebration, surrounded by my closest friends and family. My best man had done a great job organizing it, and I was excited to let loose. But when my parents walked in with my brother, it felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. I was taken aback, and I could see that my brother was equally stunned. The atmosphere in the room was electric, and I could feel the eyes of my friends on us, waiting to see how this would unfold. My parents' attempt to play peacemakers on my special day was infuriating. They stood there, expecting us to act like mature adults and resolve our issues, but they had no idea how deep the wounds ran. I could see the tension in my brother's posture, and I knew he was just as uncomfortable as I was. I didn't want to make a scene, but I also couldn't let this go unaddressed. I took a deep breath and confronted my parents, telling them that they had no right to bring him here, especially on a day that was supposed to be about celebrating my future. The silence in the room was deafening. My friends exchanged glances, unsure of how to react. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks as I tried to keep my voice steady. I didn't want to ruin the night, but I also couldn't let my parents dictate how I should feel about my brother. I had spent years healing from the wounds of our past, and I wasn't about to let them reopen. My brother stood there, looking conflicted. I could see the flicker of anger in his eyes, but there was also a hint of uncertainty. I knew he had been struggling since our fallout, and I wondered if he had changed at all in the years we had been apart. But I wasn't ready to find out. I had built a life without him, and I wasn't about to let him back in, not now. As my parents tried to reason with me, I felt a surge of frustration. They didn't understand the depth of my feelings, nor did they grasp the impact of their actions. I had spent years trying to distance myself from the chaos my parents were also out of reach. I felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety wash over me. On one hand, I was grateful for the silence. It gave me space to process everything that had happened. On the other hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that this situation was far from over. My parents had always been the type to push for family unity, and I knew they wouldn't let this go easily. A few days passed without any communication from them, and I focused on preparing for my upcoming wedding. My fiancé was incredibly supportive, helping me navigate the emotional turmoil that had resurfaced. We spent our evenings discussing our plans, laughing about the little details, and reminding each other of the love that brought us together. It was a welcome distraction from the chaos that had erupted at my bachelor party. Then, out of the blue, I received a text from my brother. It was short and to the point. "Can we talk?" My heart raced as I read the message. I hadn't heard from him in years, and the thought of engaging with him again filled me with dread. I debated whether to respond, but ultimately, I decided to ignore it. I had made it clear that I wanted nothing to do with him, and I wasn't about to change my mind now. The next day, my mother called again. This time, she was calmer, but I could still hear the underlying tension in her voice. She wanted to discuss my brother's situation further. Apparently, he had been struggling to find work and was feeling lost. She insisted that he had changed and that I should give him another chance. I listened, but I couldn't shake the memories of our last encounter. The thought of him trying to charm his way back into my life felt manipulative, and I wasn't ready to let my guard down. After hanging up, I confided in my fiancé about the conversation. She encouraged me to consider the possibility of reconciliation, but I remained skeptical. What if he hasn't really changed? I asked her. What if this is just another ploy to get back into my life? She reminded me that people can grow and evolve, but I couldn't help but feel that my brother's past actions were a reflection of who he truly was. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself caught in a cycle of anxiety and uncertainty. I wanted to believe that my brother could be different, but the scars from our past were still fresh. I decided to reach out to my aunt, the one who had rescinded the job offer. I wanted to hear her perspective on the situation and see if she had any insights into my brother's behavior. When I spoke to her, she was sympathetic but firm. "I understand that family dynamics can be complicated," she said. "But I had to prioritize the needs of my business. Your brother's behavior at your bachelor party raised serious concerns for me. I can't hire someone who might bring that kind of instability into my workplace." Her words resonated with me, and I felt a sense of validation. I wasn't the only one who saw the red flags. After our conversation, I felt a renewed sense of clarity. I didn't know my brother forgiveness, especially when he hadn't taken responsibility for his actions. I decided to send him a message, outlining my feelings and the reasons I felt it was best for us to remain apart. I wanted him to understand that my decision wasn't about holding on to anger, it was about protecting my own well-being. To my surprise, he responded almost immediately. His message was filled with apologies and a plea for understanding. He claimed that he had been working on himself and that he wanted to make amends. I read his words with skepticism, unsure if I could trust his intentions. I took my time crafting a thoughtful response, expressing my feelings while also setting clear boundaries. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on the nature of forgiveness. Was it something I owed him, or was it a gift I could choose to give when I felt ready? I realized that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or excusing his behavior, it meant freeing myself from the burden of resentment. But I also understood that it was a process, one that I wasn't ready to embark on just yet. As my wedding day approached, I focused on the love and support surrounding me. My fiancé and I were excited to start our new life together, and I was determined not to let my brother's presence overshadow our joy. I knew that whatever happened, I had the strength to navigate the challenges ahead. On the day of the wedding, I felt a mix of emotions. I was surrounded by friends and family who loved and supported me, and I was ready to embrace this new chapter of my life. As I walked down the aisle, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had made it through the turmoil, and I was ready to move forward. After the ceremony, I was approached by several family members, their decision, but honestly, it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I had spent so much time worrying about their feelings and trying to maintain a relationship that was clearly toxic. Their email was just another reminder that they were unwilling to take responsibility for their actions, and I was done trying to make things work. The wedding itself was everything I had hoped for. Surrounded by friends and family who genuinely cared about us, my wife and I exchanged vows in a beautiful ceremony that felt intimate and special. I was grateful for the support of those who were there, and it made me realize how important it is to have people in your life who uplift you rather than bring you down. My fiancée, now my wife, was radiant, and seeing her walk down the aisle filled me with joy. After the ceremony, we celebrated with our loved ones, dancing and laughing the night away. It was a stark contrast to the turmoil I had experienced with my brother and parents. I felt a sense of closure, knowing that I was moving forward with my life, leaving behind the negativity that had plagued me for so long. In the days following the wedding, my wife and I took some time to reflect on everything that had happened. We talked about my brother's unexpected apology and how it had affected me. I still felt conflicted about whether to reach out to him, but I was leaning toward forgiveness. It was a complicated situation, and I wanted to approach it with care. I decided to give it a little more time before making any decisions. I wanted to ensure that I was in the right headspace to handle whatever response he might have. My wife was supportive, encouraging me to take my time and not rush into anything. She understood the complexities of family dynamics and was there to help me navigate my feelings. As we settled into our new life together, I felt a sense of peace. I was excited about the future and the possibilities that lay ahead. I knew that I had the love and support of my wife, and that made all the difference. I was ready to focus on building a life filled with positivity and joy, free from the burdens of the past. Eventually, I decided to reach out to my brother. I sent him a message, acknowledging his apology and expressing that I appreciated him taking the time to reflect on his behavior. I let him know that I was open to the idea of rebuilding our relationship, but it would take time and effort from both of us. I wanted him to understand that while I was willing to forgive, I needed to see genuine change in him before we could move forward. To my surprise, he responded positively. He expressed gratitude for my willingness to communicate and shared that he was committed to working on himself. It felt like a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. I knew that rebuilding our relationship wouldn't happen overnight, but I was hopeful that we could find a way to coexist peacefully. As I continued to navigate this new chapter in my life, I realized that forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. It requires patience, understanding, and a willingness to let go of the past. I was learning to prioritize my own well-being while also being open to the possibility of healing my relationship with my brother. In the end, I felt empowered by the choices I had made. I had taken control of my life, set boundaries, and surrounded myself with people who truly cared about me. I was ready to embrace the future, whatever it may hold, with an open heart and a clear mind. Their presence in our lives. I'm fine with that if that's what they want. On a happier note, I did reach out to my brother a couple of days after I posted my last update, and I told him that I accepted his apology and would love for him to be present at my wedding. He graciously accepted my invitation and showed up at the wedding, and it was just a really happy day. It's crazy to think that a couple of months ago, if someone had told me that my parents would not be present at my wedding but my brother would, I would have laughed in their faces. But here we are now. Anyway, I'm just happy that everything went smoothly, and I'm finally rebuilding my relationship with my brother. Now maybe someday my parents will come to their senses and apologize to us, but for now, this is enough for me. My wife and I are going to be leaving for our honeymoon pretty soon, and life has never been better. Update 4, it's been 6 months since my wedding, and I wanted to give everyone an update on how things have been going. My wife and I had an amazing honeymoon in Bali, 2 weeks of beaches, hiking, and incredible food. Coming back to reality was difficult, but we've settled into married life beautifully. The biggest change has been my relationship with my brother. We've been meeting up for coffee every couple of weeks, slowly rebuilding what was lost during those 6 years. Our conversations were awkward at first, but we've started to find common ground. He's gotten a new job at a marketing firm, not through nepotism, but on his own merits. He seems genuinely happier now, more centered. Last month, he invited us over for dinner at his new apartment. It felt strange walking into his space, seeing the life he'd built for himself. He'd become a good cook, something I never would have expected, and prepared this elaborate 3-course meal. During dessert, he showed us old family photos he'd kept, including ones from when we were kids actually getting along. Looking at those pictures felt like glimpsing an alternate reality of what could have been. I wish we hadn't wasted so much time competing, he said that night. I wonder who we might have become if we'd been allies instead of rivals. My wife has been incredibly supportive through all of this. She admitted recently that she was skeptical at first about my brother's apology, but seeing him make a consistent effort has changed her mind. They've even developed their own friendship, which sometimes leaves me feeling like the third wheel when we all hang out. As for our parents, there's been some movement there too, though not as positive. Last week, my mother reached out via email. The message wasn't exactly an apology, more of a tentative olive branch suggesting that enough time has passed and that we should move forward as a family. My brother received the same email. We discussed it over the phone and agreed that while we're open to reconciliation, we need a real acknowledgement of how their behavior affected us. We decided to meet them for lunch next weekend, neutral territory at a restaurant downtown. I'm nervous about it but also hopeful. My therapist, yes, I finally started seeing someone to work through all this family drama, suggested setting clear boundaries and being open to hearing their perspective without accepting blame for their actions. What's most surprising about all of this is how differently I see myself now. For years, I defined myself in opposition to my brother. If he was outgoing, I was studious. If he liked sports, I'd avoid them. Now I'm discovering who I am without that contrast. Turns out we actually share some interests. We both love sci-fi novels and hiking, things we never knew about each other because we were too busy trying to be different. My wife jokes that she's getting two for the price of one now that my brother is in our lives. Last weekend, he helped us move some furniture into our new house, something I never could have imagined a year ago. As we were carrying a couch together, struggling to navigate a narrow hallway, we started laughing uncontrollably over some stupid joke. It hit me then that this is what brotherhood is supposed to feel like. I don't know what the future holds with our parents or if my brother and I will ever fully recover what was lost, but I'm grateful for where we are now. Sometimes relationships don't heal in the ways we expect, they form something new instead, something that might even be stronger for having been broken. The lunch with my parents is in 3 days. I'll update again afterward to let you know how it goes. For now, I'm trying to stay optimistic but realistic. As my brother said when we talked about meeting them, we're not kids anymore. We get to decide what family means to us now. Update 5, the lunch with our parents happened yesterday, and I'm still processing everything. My brother and I arrived at the restaurant 30 minutes early so we could get our bearings and present a united front. We agreed on some boundaries, no blaming, no rehashing of old